Maloa lele kainga ofrina, and welcome everyone to our Pasifika webinar series. The Pasifika webinar series is a continuation of the Pasifika Scholars Summer Institute that bridges culture, community, and education through Talanoa, and intends to amplify our Pasifika community's voices as well as provide resources for higher education at the University of Utah. This Zoom webinar will be moderated, recorded, and offered later on our YouTube channel, the Pasifika Archive. Special thanks to Dr. Kehau Folau, our faculty advisor, Kalei Tuitupo, and Kaimana Kahale for bringing this webinar into all of our living rooms.
Welcome everyone to our Pasifika webinar series. We're excited to have everyone here today. Our agenda will go as follows. We'll begin with a introduction of our guest panelists and their backgrounds, and then we will talk for about an hour. The last half hour, we'll open it up for questions. So please feel free throughout the program to drop questions where you see the Q&A box, and then we'll review them and answer as many as we can. Another reminder before I forget, our Pasifika Summer Scholars Institute is coming up in June the 7th through the 11th. So if you know of any undergraduate Pasifika students that are at community college or junior college, or anyone who's just interested to coming here to the University of Utah or higher ed in general, please share with them about our Pasifika Summer Institute and join us to learn more about that. Thank you. So right now I'll just introduce our panelists. And we're so grateful that they're able to participate with us, and we know that they're busy since many of them hold full-time jobs and are also various roles within the community and in their families. And the first person, Latu Kinikini, who also goes by Latu, was born in the island of Tongan, Tutanyala Hopoate, in Unisipikua. And she was raised in New Zealand, and then with her sister and 4 brothers. She's a first-generation student with several degrees. Latu first received her bachelor's degree at the University of Utah in speech and communication. She later received her master's degree in educational leadership and policy, and is currently pursuing her PhD in ELP as well here at the University of Utah. She's been working in higher ed for a very long time, 16 years, and she's currently running the program Opportunity Scholars, a first-generation undergraduate program in the Echo School of Business. Her most important role, she says, in life is as a mom and a wife. Latu has been married for 28 years to Latu Kinikini, and together they have raised 4 children, Ayune, Maile, Nisi, and Noah. Our next speaker is Tanjerine Vei, or Tanji. She's a PhD candidate in Education, Culture, and Society, where she received her MED from the same program. Their research focuses on the development of pedagogies that promote critical consciousness and healing, spiritual activism, and community building. A central focus on these pedagogical approaches is creating teaching and learning environments that take on a playful spirit that can facilitate dialogue across differences. And it's awesome because Tanji is our Pasifika Dissertation Fellow, and their dissertation is titled Spiritual Activism and Activist Education, Examining the Spirit of Transformative Pedagogies. And it's a critical participatory action research project wherein the research conducted is in community with those whom the research is intended. And so thank you. We're excited for to talk with Tanji. Our next speaker, our next panelist is Lavinia Uluave. She was born in Kahuku, Hawaii, to her parents who are both from the Kingdom of Tonga. She was raised here in Salt Lake City on the west side, and as a high school senior was awarded the Gates Millennium Scholarship, a prestigious scholarship that would pay for her entire higher ed education. This led her to graduating from Brigham Young University in Family Life Sciences with a minor in sociology, and then later graduated with a Master's of Public Health from Westminster College. She also received a Master's of Arts in Education from UCLA, or University of California, Los Angeles, and is currently a PhD student in higher education and organizational change, PhD student at UCLA. So her research focuses on Tongan American women histories and their educational histories and their experience in higher ed. And finally, our last panelist is Kehau Folau, who is the third daughter of Olona and Melusina Folau. Her parents migrated to the US in the 80s from Tonga and Ponape and settled on the west side of Salt Lake City. She is also another West Side resident from Rose Park. She's currently the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Utah Valley University, and she is also a PhD student in Education, Culture, and Society at the University of Utah. And Dr. Kehau Lanivan is her dissertation chair. Her research interests include Indigenous approaches to relationality and that of Tongan practices in Fuafatongia and Tauhiva. Welcome. I'd like to welcome all four of you to our webinar today. All right, awesome. Just as an icebreaker, we always ask what everyone's favorite artist is. It can be a Pasifika artist, but it's musical artist, and just icebreaker to humanize you, since everyone is like, okay, they all have a combined of 15 degrees. So we're trying to also humanize you, that you all are regular people. So can you please share what's your probably just your favorite artists or influences in your life? Maybe some tied to your research work and maybe not. We'll start with Kehau, who looks like she knows.
I actually don't know. There's too many. I think growing up in the US, I listened to a lot of Black artists. And so I grew up listening to Whitney, Mariah, Sade, Toni Braxton, and then like the classics like Marvin Gaye and just a lot of Black artists. But I like all music. If it makes me dance, then I like it. But yeah.
I'm with Kehau. I love all music, and without the music, I couldn't have gotten through all my studies. But if I were to name one, well, there's two. I love Lauryn Hill and I love Beyonce.
Gosh, I feel like I'm old school. I think anything 80s. I just remember growing up, a lot of local artists in New Zealand was what I would listen to, like Adija, Crowded House. And so, you know, I think I'm just old school. I still think that was the best time that music came out. But there are some really good artists even today, like Josh Tatofi, Three Houses Down. Great music. And, you know, so I think I'm like every Kehau too. Like I like all kinds of music, all kinds of genres.
Yeah, same actually. I have a wide range of music. I actually couldn't pick a single artist, but I will say disco dance music definitely gets me out of my chair. It's the best music to be silly and stuff too, so I'll roll with that.
So I wanted to just lay the foundation. We've heard your bios. Thank you for sharing your. I'll probably have to. We've said this how many times, but we should start a playlist to help us get through. Well, actually, you guys, I don't. You all, I don't study as much or am writing as much as you all. So to get you through all of those writings. The next question, I think, just for you all to really introduce yourselves is just telling us a little bit about your educational journey here to where you are as PhD student and then Tanji as a PhD candidate. And I know that like sometimes it becomes like mythological, like there's people, they work so hard and then boom, they have a PhD and now they're fancy and you never see them ever again. But something like Tanji talks about even in their introduction of the bio, I was like writing not just about people, but with them. And maybe we'll start off with Tanji of like how would you explain your educational journey that brought you to that?
I will try not to be long-winded. I mean, honestly, my educational journey sort of hinges on just the fact that I kind of don't want to not be in school. So I'm doing a pretty good job with that, I think. Still here. One of my friends reminded me that I was an undergrad 15 years ago. I haven't been in school that whole time. I took 4 years off between my undergrad and my master's, but yeah, honestly, it's that I really enjoy being able to think with other people and having that access to other thinkers and to be able to talk with other people about the things that I find so interesting in education. And so honestly, my educational journey has just been that, like wanting to learn more things. So I don't know if that answers your question in terms of linking everything, but I'll stop there.
I think we'll touch on it as we continue. So no worries, Tanji. Latu?
Gosh, I feel like just looking back that my educational journey has been more transformative of an experience for me. It's definitely been life-changing in a way that when I kind of started the journey, I really didn't know how to articulate what I was going through or what my experiences were until much later on, especially during the PhD program. And so I feel like it's changed me to kind of who I am now, and I'm a very different person. It connects me to my family and to my roots, and I think especially to my ancestors, because when I look back, I mean, my family migrated from Tongan when I was a little girl. Then we moved to New Zealand, and so my sister, my brothers, and I were raised in New Zealand, but we were surrounded with a very close-knit Tongan community, and also with my family. And so I just remember just being instilled by, you know, especially my grandparents and my parents, that education is really important. And there was a reason why we traveled or migrated to New Zealand. And so that has kind of stayed with me. And also just the love of learning. I feel like everything that I've learned throughout my own education has really opened my eyes to see the world in a very different way. And then also has really helped me as far as, you know, being critical or asking questions, which I didn't do when I started in the very beginning. So there's a lot of little incidences and experiences that I've had throughout my journey that has kind of just encouraged me to keep moving forward. So that's a snippet of it.
Oh, okay, how?
Yeah, I think if I had to describe it, I would say I'm a follower. My older sisters luckily got into the U, and then my oldest sister, after her bachelor's, she went and got her master's, and I was just like, crap, like my parents will expect that too. And so, you know, it was kind of just following them. And I've been really lucky to have mentors who have guided me along this journey. I also love to learn. And so I think I'm positioning myself on purpose of where I am right now. My boss is Belinda Otogolo Satuban, who's the first Tongan woman to graduate from my program, ECS. And then also my dissertation chair has my same name. And so it's really just following these folks who, you know, I love to think with and I love to learn from. And so, yeah.
For me, very similar to a lot of you all. I think I just grew up with education in my family as the most important thing that we need to pursue, upward mobility, but also to learn. And I love learning. And also, I think part of the reason why I wanted to do it was show appreciation for all those who came before me, who sacrificed so much so that I can have this opportunity here in the States or in America. This was the dream. And so I just kind of followed along with that storyline in the beginning, but as I've gone on, I realized I'm not good at sports, so this was it. But also, I think just like everyone else, I learned to love it. And it's just become a huge part of my life to research, to learn, to analyze, and to grow from other people's experiences and all of that. So
I think all of you talked about this love of learning and understanding. Was there a moment or a time where you're like, even though Kehau said she was following folks, but was there a moment or a time where you're like, I want to be Dr. Kinikini? Or was that a huge influence in terms of outside forces that were pushing you towards this thing? And coming from Tongan home, I could see how it can be pushed. But share whether or not it is one of the factors, but share a moment where or the time when you're like, oh, this is something that I do want to pursue, to become a PhD or a doctor.
I can share a story that I have shared with my kids. As far as my maternal grandfather, Devita Bikula, did not have wanted to plan on doing this, but I believe that he saw something in me before I even realized it. And that kind of resonated, I think, in my senior year in high school. I was a student body president and we had an awards night. And at the end of the event, I just remember my mom and my dad there and my grandparents. And I went up to them to thank them for attending the event. And my grandfather had handed me a textbook. And I just remembered feeling, oh, this is going to be great because there's probably money inserted inside the book. And when I opened the front pages, there was no envelope, no money, and it was a book on human anatomy and physiology, and which was kind of ironic because science was definitely not my favorite subject. But my grandfather had wrote a little note in there and he said, Dr. Latu, you can be whatever you want to be. And that actually resonated with me. It didn't make sense then, but I just thought, oh, okay, that's great. You know, that my grandfather believed that I could be a doctor. And so it really didn't resonate until I had applied into the PhD program and got accepted. And then I realized what he meant, you know, so that has always stayed with me. And in a way, you know, had always kind of pushed me to move forward because there was not just this expectation, but there was this belief as well from, you know, my grandfather.
Thank you, Latu. Sandeep.
Yeah, I thought I would follow that just because there's a similar strain. I don't know that there was a moment where I was like, oh, I want to be doctor, you know. I think it was during my master's degree. Like I said, I was like, I'm not done being in school, so I guess I'll apply for this other thing. But since then, So Vei is actually my grandmother's name. She came to the U.S. from Tongan in 1958. And I go by that because I like it better than the sort of like patriarchal last name that I was given, right? It's my middle name legally. But when my grandma found out that I go by it as my last name, and then I got into the PhD program, she just started telling everybody, like, this is my granddaughter, this is Dr. Vei. And so for me, when things get difficult and I think, oh, can I do this? I'm like, I have to now, because every time, like on Facebook, somebody posts something, it can be like a birthday, it can be like a picture of my cat, and my grandma will like comment on there, like, this is my granddaughter, this is Dr. Vei. And I'm like, well, I have to finish now. So, but yeah, I'm the first person in my family out of my siblings or even my parents to even graduate from college for my undergrad, let alone do graduate work. So I think it's something that my family gets really excited about. So.
What a tribute to carry her name and then also be Dr. Vei. That's a beautiful, just like, yeah, the tribute to it.
I think so. Growing up, I didn't even know what a PhD doctor was. I didn't even know that was an option. I didn't know any of the things that I have gone into were options. These are things that I've just learned and have like fell upon in the journey of trial and error. And then I think I found where I fit at this point. But I think what I thought I could do growing up was a lawyer or doctor, like medical doctor. And I love medicine and health and all those things. And so I did go into pre-med thinking I would be a medical doctor, but I've gone in another route, doctor, for today, and I really enjoy it. But I think, like Latu said, one of those things that pushed me, because I'm the first person in my family to go into grad school and to enter these new unknown waters, was like what keeps me going, because it's been a difficult journey. Definitely rough, because there's things that come at you that you just never knew. And I'm just learning along the way is like the voice of my grandparents. My grandma, she always said when I was growing up, like, you was a smart girl. And so I believed her, and I kept going and trying my best, because I don't think that things come to me as easily as they would my sister Moana. But I try so much harder, and I put effort and study and work in it for myself, learn and to grow, because that's what my grandma said. She said I could do it. And so that's a great woman influence in my life. And then my grandpa, he always said, a pen in your pocket is lighter than a shovel on your back. A Tongan proverb translated into English, and just like, this is the route that I'm going to go. And so those are kinds of driving forces, as I remember back from them, that have helped me along the way.
I love that, Lavi. I love both those sayings, because Mo, I think you referenced that a couple of times too, both those sayings. Similar to what Tanji said, I don't think there's ever a moment where I was just like, I want to be a doctor. I think there's still times where I'm like, I don't want to be a doctor. Like, if this is what I have to do to get to that stage, I'm like, I think I really struggle with it, and I'm still struggling with it. I'm only in my second year, and I'm like, if I make it to my third year, then I have to finish. But if I don't, then it's okay. Like, I met so many great people along the way that I'm like, I'll just call them if I want to like go on these like philosophical tangents. But the good thing too is like, I'm actually considered, well, growing up, like my parents were like, oh, your siblings are the smart ones. Like, and it's true, they're brilliant. And like, I think I'm lucky in the fact that, a lot of my thinking is pushed by them, instead of these oftentimes classrooms. And so like my siblings, my cousins, they push me to think bigger and beyond some things. And so I don't know if I'm there, like if I want to be a doctor. I think it's just, out of all the colonial contradictions that I can choose, I think I choose education.
Let's talk about that. All of you mentioned some of the challenges. What are some of the challenges that you all have faced in this process? Be it, well, you all do things in multiple realms or multiple levels. I know, Tanji, your dissertation title was spirituality. Lavi's even touching on that with her dissertation. But like, what are some, be it emotional, mental, spiritual challenges that have come about with this intellectual pursuit?
I'm like, where do I begin? I will say, honestly, for me right now, the biggest challenge is writing during a pandemic, right? Writing is already a very lonely thing. But before the pandemic, I was part of a writing group, and we got to meet twice a week. And I was resistant to writing groups at first, but then having one and then not, I think that's been a really big challenge, because like every day kind of looks the same, and I have to find that motivation to like sit down at my desk and keep writing the same thing and working on it, being at the stage that I'm at. When I was in classes, I could write a paper and I would submit it and I would be done. Now I write a thing, I submit it, I get it back, and I rewrite it, right? And so just because that's the stage that I'm at, I miss people, I miss being in classes. I miss having a sense of accomplishment, like, right? I have to adjust to how I understand like what an accomplishment is in this stage is not that same thing that you get at the end of a semester after finishing your classes. I have to understand it differently in order to keep that motivation to keep writing. So that would be my biggest challenge right now, is just that solitary kind of repetitive process.
I'm just gonna add to what Tanji said as far as writing. I had always felt that writing was one of my weaknesses. I really didn't think that I was a good writer. And I had found too, I mean, as a first generation college student as well, I had always felt like I was kind of behind in my classes, because when it came to reading, and we all know how many readings we would have to complete before each class, for a discussion, I would find myself trying to read slowly or having to read articles twice, just so that I can really understand the concepts and come prepared. And so that was one of my biggest challenges. And then the second challenge for me was the imposter syndrome. That even throughout my studies, I mean, even starting as an undergraduate student, I always had this fear, or that there were times where I would kind of ask myself, like, do I really belong here? And so that had been always something that I had to like quickly switch my mindset and change the way that I would think about, my education, is that, yeah, I worked so hard to get to where I'm at. And so I think oftentimes I find myself falling into that, even as a PhD student, and then having to like switch that mindset. So those were my two biggest challenges. And I think maybe a third one is just trying to balance the whole role of like being a PhD student and working full time, and then also trying to raise a family. I really don't know how that worked out. It just did. And I feel like that came from a pretty good support system from families and from my husband. But, so when somebody, asks me like, can you do this? And I would like say, yes, you can, and there's ways that you can find a way to work it out. But I mean, if you're really passionate and you're determined and you really want to do this, I think it can happen for anyone.
Oh.
Okay, love it. I just adding to what Latu said, I think last year I threw out the concept of balance, and instead try to find a rhythm with all the things that I do, because luckily I have no kids. I have a dog, but I do work full time and I do go to school full time. And so it's, I read this like meme of, and one of my friends shared it with me last year, of like, you need to, you're juggling all these balls and you need to figure out which one's glass and which one's rubber and which ones will bounce back. And then they'll tell you like, okay, your health and your family and your friends are the glass ones. And so those are the ones that you need to, you know, keep in your hand. But in reality, at least for me, you know, my family and my friends have been the rubber balls, and I drop them a lot. But they're always there, they're always with me. And I mean, I think it kind of shows me how fragile, you know, school and work is. You know, if I, like last year, 2020 sucked, it's continuing, but I think, you know, if I did drop one of these, it is super fragile, and it could break. But I think because there's an end goal of like getting this PhD, I could drop it soon. I don't know. I'm still figuring it out. I'm struggling. So I don't know.
Yeah, I'm struggling too. Don't worry. We're all in it together. I think I think that putting it on paper that this is a goal versus the reality of actually working in it and going through it are totally different, because these trials and stresses and things that I've had to face, I never knew that those would be things that I would have to face. But imposter syndrome, definitely one of those. And I think that is extra because I don't see anybody else that looks like me. And it was hard being in these classes and in these spaces as the first one in my family to enter this. And no one mentored me or taught me anything. And so it's like I'm trying to learn what they're currently teaching and also do research on what they're telling me, because I'm having to go way backwards. So I'm working extra hard to catch up. And I think that was what was hard for me. And so I went in like blindly. So what I do want to mention is like, yeah, PhD looks great as a goal. And I encourage many people to, if that is your goal, to work towards it and do it. But I'm gonna be real, it's rough, it's hard, it's stressful, and it's not easy. And you're gonna face a lot of things, because like Kehau said, balance and Latu is necessary. Mental health is real. All these things come into play because you have multiple relationships with various things, your Tongan, your religion, or I'm Tongan, or a Pacific Islander. We have a lot of responsibilities and things that are expected of us, even within my own family. I don't have a husband and children, but I do have siblings and nieces, nephews, and parents, you know, whose health and stuff you have to care for and take care of, and all those things happen as time goes on. So I think it's just being ready to roll with the punches. Things don't always work like ABC. Sometimes I'm like at Z. Like I've had to recalibrate many times to make things work for me. And what I'm learning is, because I am a perfectionist and I like things to go my way, but it doesn't always work that way. And what I've learned over this process is to give myself grace, and it's okay if I didn't reach that goal. There's always tomorrow to start over. And I think that's what I just want to encourage people is like, it's gonna be rough, but you're gonna make it if this is what you really want.
How do you all think that coming from Tongan families has made the PhD process more challenging or more helpful, or both at the same time? How does like the being like your identity or Pacifica identity play into these challenges? Kehau.
For me, I think I think for me, you know, similar to what Lavi was saying, like all the responsibilities that come up with, I feel like one of my most important roles is being an auntie. And I love my nieces and nephews so much that I try to make time and like set aside the time to be with them. But, you know, juggling work and school, it takes up so much time that it's just like, it's hard at times. But you know, you want to fulfill those responsibilities. Those are the responsibilities that keep me going and that sustain me. I also love it because I feel like there's a roasting culture. And so, you know, I throw out my ideas to like my siblings and my cousins, and, you know, I love them because they keep me in check. They're like, that's okay. That's, you could, you know, go this way or that way. And yeah, I love the environment that they bring, but yeah.
There's too many challenges that they it's like, which one should I mention?
Moana, I could probably add, I think there are challenges with having a big family background, or small. I mean, especially in the Tongan culture, just because one of the tenets is fatongia, is having to fulfill responsibility. And so that, along with having to, be a student, can kind of weigh in sometimes. And I think of that as far as, family events, family functions, funerals. And I have found, like, while I started in the program, that there were just some things that I couldn't attend. And yet my heart was there. I wanted to participate in some of these family events, and I just couldn't. And what I had appreciated was when my family could understand that, and they could represent. And so that, to me, is some of the beauty of, the family unit. But it goes back to, what everyone had alluded to. There were just some things that, I felt like I sacrificed, just because I couldn't, because I had a paper that I needed to write that was due the next day or so. And so what I had appreciated was the support that came from family.
Tanjerine or Lavi?
Just to add to that, this is kind of what my dissertation is looking at Tongan American women and their experience, and I'm looking at the educational histories of PhD women, and then retrospectively looking at their history throughout their higher educational experience. And so a huge theme that has come up a lot, I agree with Latu, is fatongia and tauhiva, nourishing these relationships, because we're not attending. I think it's hard because no one really truly understands what a PhD student does. Like, I am still learning what we do, and to explain that to somebody else, they're like, stop writing. Oh, you don't have like a real set schedule, you're writing. But it's like, no, I have deadlines and I have an advisor to speak to, and like all these intricate things, people don't really understand what all goes on. And those are things that in my head that maybe I should share it more often to explain, but sometimes people are trying to hear it. They're just saying, no, you have to be here at this time to fulfill your responsibility. And sometimes that's hard for me, as I have 7 sisters and I'm on the older half. And so I have a lot of those responsibilities, and even more so, it just happens to be because I'm single that I have everything else. Everyone's busy, so it's me. And so I think that is hard to juggle with the culture, is not having people be mad at you, but trying to help them understand what you're actually doing, that in the long run, it's for all of us. And I really am trying to help the community and hopefully build there, but it is difficult because people they want the here and now. And sometimes I have to also look at things like, no, school can wait. This to me is more important, a more important relationship that I want to really nourish and keep, and a responsibility that I want to uphold, because that is more important to me than this writing right now. And I think it's just one of those where you just have to keep analyzing everything and seeing what is best in those kinds of situations. But it does make it difficult making the right choice in those situations.
Yeah, this is kind of a difficult question for me to speak into for a few reasons. I think the easiest way to talk about it, though, or the most pleasant, is that I'm in school. I think I've gotten more respect from my family. And they're really excited about it, but I'm a little jealous, Kehau. I actually can't bring my ideas to my family. Like we don't talk about that. They're like, yeah, you're doing that thing, cool. Like we're happy for you. You'll be a professor one day. But like beyond that, that's not really something we bond over. So it's kind of like both at the same time, if that makes sense. Like we're proud of you and also not our world kind of thing. So.
So I'm really interested because I kind of know a little bit about everybody's research here, and what are the factors that have led you to maybe trying to balance, as Tanji was saying, like you can have both worlds happening here, or just led you to your research in general. Lavi talked a little bit about what she's researching, but for the rest of you, giving us a little synopsis before we enter into questions of what your research is and what brought you there.
I could go because I am not certain what my research is. All I know is that I'm interested in Indigenous approaches to relationality, how we relate to each other in higher ed. And so, you know, I feel like that there's a lot of tension within that. I'm mostly interested in, Lavi brought it up, like tauhiwa, how do we nourish and nurture space between all of us in a Western system such as higher ed that constantly tries to tear us down. And so I don't know where I'm going with that yet, but I feel like what I see within my family, how they tauhiwa, how they fulfill their responsibilities. I think I look at that as examples of what I want to bring into my space. If I have to be at work and school for so long, like how can I transfer those ethics into my practice here on campus? And so that's what I try to do, like just in my own practice, but it's also guiding my research of like, I don't know how to do this. And so let me just research about it and see if I could adopt it into my own practice.
I think my research kind of stemmed from my own college experience. And then also with the work that I'm currently doing at the University of Utah, working with first generation college students who are pursuing a business degree. And then just kind of finding how interesting it is that my experience is so similar to the current first generation students, and then trying to implement certain programs that would assist first generation students to like continue to thrive and to graduate. And so what I'm kind of interested in learning is understanding the college experiences of Tongan American students in a four-year institution like the University of Utah. And what's been really interesting, I think, with the classes that I've taken in the PhD program that focus on Indigenous education or Indigenous research methodology is that I started to realize that this was a research method that I wanted to implement because it was appropriate and it was ethical. And so that's kind of where I'm focused right now. and hoping to be able to do that kind of research, not only to understand those experiences, but to also be a voice for Tongan American students.
I think this is officially my 5th year in my PhD program. And so hopefully within the next year, I can wrap it up. But what I'm so happy about is when I first started, I don't remember having this many Pacific Islanders in PhD programs that could be of support to each other. And so that just all makes me happy. So when I first came up with my research project, it was more a reflection of my experience. Like I said before, it's like a lonely road. If in the realms of, yeah, because I left Utah and I was by myself, but more so I didn't have a lot of Polynesians or Pacific Islanders or Tongans around me. And I was like always the only Tongan woman. And so that's something that I wanted to talk about. And I knew that there were stories there to be told. And also I wanted to write stuff about our people so that those up and coming can read it, since I didn't have someone to read about in this Tongan American experience. And so I think that's what I drew upon. I really want to help and encourage Pacific Islander students and the community to access education. And hopefully when they see someone like them and can read stories about themselves, pretty much, that can encourage them to reach those goals. I think that in the long term, that's in my mind what I thought. And so that's why I focused on my research. Right now, it's specifically Tongan American women, but in general, the Pacific Island experience, the diaspora here is all gonna benefit.
What led me to my research is, well, so my experiences in my community, it's a chosen community, has a lot to do with why I went to school in the first place and my desire to continue learning, and really shaped a lot of my adult life. And so in the community work that I do now, what I see my research is doing is giving back to that same community that shaped me. I am first generation. This whole college experience is new to me, and I do feel like I've gained a lot of really important insights in that process, and using that knowledge and coming back to my community. And it is a mouthful, Moana, when you're reading my bio. It's critical participatory action research. But that's taking me longer to finish my dissertation because it's a messier kind of research. But it's kind of the thing I care about the most. Is I want it to, the work that I do, to be in community with other people, and that we are co-creating the process together, and learning together what it means to create and enact transformative pedagogies. So that's what led me to mine.
Thank you, Tanji. I think what is so fascinating to me, and also drawing so many folks to watch today, was the fact that a lot of you are forging this new path, right? And hearing you all explain about like your own personal experiences, even for me, who I'm staff here, so I'm like, I see professors and people all the time. It's not necessarily representation for me anymore, but just like the ability to be doing these things, especially in the way that you want to. So you're talking about like using indigenous methodologies. Tanji's talking about, okay, I'm just gonna make up my own and we're gonna co-create these things with folks. Like, I would say even 5 years ago, even a decade, I know for a decade ago that these weren't conversations that were so open. And so thank you all, even for just sharing. those pieces of yourself, I think is rather empowering for us to hear. So we're going to transition into answering some of the questions that people have dropped for us. And if anybody else in the audience wants to or has a question, please feel free to put in the Q&A, and then we'll ask the panelists. So the first question is, I'm wondering if you can share your experiences or thoughts on developing critical thinking generally while existing in a Western system, also relating the Western approach to knowledge as needing to be evidenced compared to the oral traditions in our families. That's a good question. So I think you all can view it, right? Or do you need me to? You should be able to view it. So what are your thoughts on developing critical thinking? That's a loaded one. I could answer a lot of those. I wonder what you are thinking. You kind of touched on it, Latu and Lavi, before about like critical thinking and then coming into these spaces and developing that. So thoughts around that.
Mo, I don't see the question. Can you repeat it? Sorry.
Yeah, I'll reread it. Can you share your experiences or thoughts on developing critical thinking generally while existing in a Western system, also relating the Western approach to knowledge as needing to be evidenced compared to the oral traditions in our families?
I mean, the first thing that comes up for me actually in the work that I'm doing is I'm finding that critical thinking itself can be a little bit Western, for lack of a better word, right? I'm working currently within the tensions of like critical pedagogy and other relational methodologies. Sometimes I think it's the critical discourses that can get in our way because they become so infatuated with identity categories, which are colonialist in so many ways, right? And a lot of the work that I'm doing right now is we're trying to find our way through, like, how do we actually rework what critical discourses would have us attend to, which are our identities, right? To find something a little bit more holistic. And that's some deeply ingrained training that we have, and it's hard to do. But when thinking about like, what does it mean to transform what is so habitually Western categorized, not relational ways of thinking and being together, it's kind of hard. So I don't know if that answers the question, but I just kind of got stuck on that. Like, I don't know how to teach critical thinking at the same time, because sometimes they start to contradict each other, which can be generative in and of itself too. But
yeah, I really like that. I think I at least I'm trying to embrace those contradictions that come up, and even to say like, or to be aware of the Western system, like investigate that, ask about that. I think how I've developed further of just questioning is who I'm reading. I try to be mindful of who I read, and thankfully, like this semester and last semester, I have 2 Indigenous faculty. Like they purposely build their syllabus where we're reading Indigenous and Black scholars. And so like, is what I'm reading and consuming more than just the Western system of, you know, this canon of white men? But I'm still working out that second part of the question of like relating the Western approach to knowledge. That's a good question. I need to think on that.
I'm probably the same as Kehau as far as the critical thinking part, because I remember the first course that I took in the PhD program was a course on inquiry. And a lot of like what I was learning was from a westernized perspective. And then even throughout some of the courses that I had taken in the educational leadership and policy, again, westernized perspective. And I had always felt in my classes that there was something missing, and I didn't know how to articulate that. And so like Kehau, it was more of just being aware that, you know, about what it was that I was learning. And I think how we were doing the same thing the last 2 semesters. We took courses on Indigenous research methodology and Indigenous knowledge. And that just blew me away because I felt like I was now able to articulate and make those connections, and then even start asking questions, you know, as far as, okay, that's one perspective that we're looking at this particular concept. But then, you know, how about looking at it from a holistic view? And so that has, for me, that has just been more interesting because it has really changed the way that I see my surrounding and my environment, and being able to ask those questions like, why not see it another way? And maybe it's a better way.
Lavi, did you want to add? Sorry.
I mean, I agree with everyone. Yeah, I think it's hard to navigate a system that's the Western system here, where I only have so much power and control and how I can finish. But what I am more aware of in my own work is for me to just do Pacific Islander or Tongan women work is going against what these people are even used to or even want to hear. And I've had pushback from many people, and I said, and I put my foot down, like, this is my passion, this is my research, this is what I want to do. I think in small ways like that, and in reading all this Pacific Islander work that is out there from the people that teach Indigenous work and studies, and all those things are good to combat the Western ways of learning and thinking. And I tried my best to implement as much as I can, like oral traditions. I know it's so important. And so I do qualitative work where I can talk and record their stories that they explain to me. And so I think that is important. And so in those kinds of ways, I can capture and then put it in. And I'm trying to introduce Tongan words and Tongan methodology, and on all those ways that push back against, as much as I can, with the Western ways of research and doing enough to help me still make it make it through. And once I get to where I need to be, I'm going to go full on with my own agenda. And so I think even from teaching a course of Pacific Islander, all the Pacific Islander classes, what was important for me is I only drew upon Pacific Islander work and story and all of those things, and helping the students think differently and to see things differently than they would have. And so I think in those ways I have contributed, but I'm very much in it and learning still, and trying to understand what that means and how to go about it. So yeah, good question. That was there's a lot to think about with that one.
The next question builds off of that last one. It says, your testimony to your family, friendships, and community ties are so powerful, as are your comments about the struggles involved in navigating university and Tongan queer, and other epistemologies and values. I wonder what each of you might reach for as a metaphor regarding the tensions, contradictions, struggles, and rewards you have to navigate. That's a really good question. I hope you can see it on the side, or do you want me to reread it?
Or so this isn't my metaphor, so I'll just say that. It's Daniel Hernandez. A lot of us know him. His pen name is Arcia Tekun, but he refers a lot to the undercurrents of the university. And so there's this article, oh, it's facing on me. But it's about the undercommons and the university and how it's really these spaces kind of in the underbelly of the university that you build these relationships. And so I feel like, I think of when he's talking about the undercurrents of like, these are the relationships that I look forward to, that sustain me here, that keep me here. And the good thing is like, it's also the relationships that are taken out of the university. Like I see them on campus and in the community. And so I think as far as a metaphor, I kind of go along Daniel's line of thinking of like, I'm occupying the undercurrents and not necessarily the university, but you know, it's one of the same. I'm still grappling with that contradiction, but again, I'm trying to learn to embrace these contradictions. But yeah, good question.
Anyone else can think of a metaphor for their experience? I'll let you think of that. One of our next questions, that is a good, I think like on the spot, how to think about a metaphor. Another question someone has is, and it's similar to, we'll couple those. If your house was on fire, what book on your shelf would you rush back to save? Maybe in combination with who's your favorite theorist. So that's Jake. He wants to know which book, because I know behind Tanji, behind Latu, behind Lavi, and Kehau, there's like books and books. See? Only one. You only can pick one.
If my parents are listening, it's the Book of Mormon, but I'm thinking of my real one, so hold on. That's my answer for my parents. Mom and Dad, if you're listening, that's the one I'll grab.
Okay, I'll go because like I'm gonna not answer that question by saying I would just sit down by my books and cry. Like because if I could only take one, I couldn't do that. I mean, I would get my cats out of the window and then I would sit by my books and cry. But to answer some of my favorite theorists, Gloria Anzaldúa is kind of up there, definitely. Leanne Simpson, Cynthia Dillard. I'll stick with those, yeah. And definitely wouldn't want those books to be burned. So.
I think for me, it's hard to choose. There's so many good books, but because
the Book of Mormon too.
Yeah. Because I'm so engrossed in my research right now, all I can think of, and I love this book and I'm learning a lot from it, is Devita Kaili's Marking Indigeneity. So that's what I've been using a lot with my dissertation. And so I think that's the one on my mind right now that I would grab. Or this one. Love this one.
Yes. I was going to say probably her work as well on decolonizing methodologies, but Devita Kaili's book was really good. And then also Leanne Simpson and Min Thorn and Shotan. Should I continue? But those are all really good books. And those were books that I believe we recently had read the last 2 semesters. So those were really, really good. They were a great foundation for me.
I think one that I would just add, I love all the books that were mentioned, but it was given to me as a gift as a freshman in my undergrad, was Dr. Trask's From a Native Daughter. And I feel like whoever has my copy, could you give it back? Because because I need my notes and my margins back.
You can borrow mine, or you can have mine.
Or I have another one because I feel like friends just, give you these books as gifts. So thank you to those who given me, but yeah, I want my one from my freshman year.
I think that that's why they become so precious, is when you write all of your notes in them. And that's like, Tanji's like, I'll just cry because that was like, my dissertation is in these books. But I do appreciate just the nod to that of like how then these books become these spiritual texts, or these, so not the Book of Mormon, but other spiritual texts. Yeah, Kehau. All right, so another question we have is kind of combined with Dr. Stockton and Dr. Vaughn's about, Dr. Stockton talks about, can you share a pleasurable intellectual moment that made you feel like this is worth it? And along with that, what are some of your practices for self-care to help you navigate? Like, I wouldn't try to be a downer, but I also really appreciate how candid you all have been and sharing that it is a difficult process. And that oftentimes in your first generation, everybody's like, yeah, go be a doctor. And then you're in and you're like, no one said it was gonna be terrible too. So is this worth it? And what are some practices in your daily life that allow you to just rejuvenate?
That's two parts question. I'm going to try to hold on to both of them. Something that makes me think that this is worth it. That was one question, right? One of the cool things about doing participatory action research is that I get to have ongoing focus groups, and I'm doing it with a community in which I'm an insider. So I get to basically hang out with my friends for my research. And there have been many moments where we are talking together about our shared practices and we're making sense of things together. And while I'm struggling in the writing, the focus group part, like the data collection part, is there's just many moments where I that's what I'm like, this is worth it. This is what I'm doing. And then for self-care, I've learned that grad students start to do really weird things for self-care. I have a friend who started making dolls. Dolls terrify me. I don't do that. But I actually make kombucha. I have like 4 or 5 gallons going at any given time. I make kombucha vinegar. I make different flavored kombuchas. I make kombucha cocktails. That's a self-care. But that, and then when it's warm outside, I'm gardening. That's always been a thing for self-care for me. So.
Now we know who to get kombucha from. It's very healthy.
I'm trying to think of self-care. I love self-care because whenever I get money, I like to get my nails done or my hair or something like that I'll save up for with student money budget that I can then, when I finally can afford it, then I'll treat myself. But I think I don't have anything fancy. I like to binge watch Netflix TV shows. I think having anything that numbs my mind that has nothing to do with my schoolwork is self-care. And I love to hang out with my friends, but it's been hard during this pandemic. But I think shopping, retail, therapy, all those things are things that help me, and spending time with my family. I wish it was exercise, but no, those are the things that I kind of turn to.
I'll go. I struggle with self-care. I should just say period after that. I struggle a lot with self-care. I'm still trying to find healthy coping mechanisms to deal with school and work. But I'm with Lavi. Anything that takes me away from what I study or what I do for work, I would consider self-care. And then also spending time with my family to address Dr. Stockton's question of like, what's worth it? Or are there moments of like saying, oh, this is all worth it? I think it's the relationships that I found, you know, in those undercurrents, like all of you. And then I've been really lucky, I feel like, meeting fellow classmates and people along the way of just who push my thinking, and then also are just good vibes. I feel like I've found a lot of people who I can't work with. And so, you know, learning how to navigate them, I think is also self-care. When I come to like you, Mo, I'm like, this person's annoying. Like, how do I deal with this? And then our conversation, I feel like, is self-care a lot of times. But yeah, I'm still trying to figure it out.
So my in September, my husband and I both got COVID. And so we were out for a long time, sick. We had all the symptoms. And I think my husband probably had it the worst because he had pneumonia. And so he was in the hospital for about 2 weeks. And, you know, that whole experience was for me an eye opener, as far as just how important health was, and how oftentimes they take it for granted. Because, you know, when you're studying as a PhD student, I can sit for hours and not really do anything. I mean, just be relaxed the whole day. And I started to realize that I had to find some kind of balance. And so my husband and I were kind of committed to, you know, doing workout or doing some kind of physical activity every week. And so I have a huge appreciation for health, for good health. And so that to me is probably my, you know, my wellness right there, is just working out with family. And also being around family can be really, I mean, rejuvenating, especially when you surround yourself with positive people, and people that love you. And if you feel that, I think that's always, you know, good to have. Another part of, you know, just realizing how important it is to be a student and the kind of work that we do is, especially when I work with students who are struggling in their classes or academically, or they're, you know, just not really focused on their studies. I find that I take on this this mother role, you know, and reminding them that you know, that it's important that they represent the community. And so that to me is really important, that if I'm telling that to these young students who are coming through, then, you know, that if I could be that one person that can make some kind of impact, then this work is important.
So you all have, thank you for sharing, and especially with the health part, that it's cliche to say like we take it for granted, but you really do. When you do have good health, you're not like constantly thinking about it. And another part, one of the other questions going into this is from Daniel Hernandez. Oh, Dr. Daniel Hernandez. He says, I wonder how much has your thinking changed or expanded since you have been studying both in and outside of the university for your research? How has that improved, challenged, or changed existing relationships with family, community, or society? That's a good one. I'm also thinking about the metaphor question that combines with what book you would get if your house was on fire. But then I think about like how reading those books made your house go on fire, at least for me, because like systemically, structurally, like I was never questioning these things about just about the whole system, right? So I'm wondering like, and that's because you read these things and expand your brain, and sometimes it's like, let me catch up. But the effect that it had on your relationships, I am wondering how that's an interesting part.
I'll be brief. I think I was lucky in that in my undergrad, my studies were ethnic studies. And so I feel like my house has been on fire for quite some time. And, I'm just waiting for it to burn down. And, trying to enjoy it, watching it burn down, but then also realizing like it's also a part of my job to put it out. So that kind of sucks. But Daniel, yeah, thanks for your question, because I think when I was in my undergrad and even in my master's still, the language that I used with family was very inaccessible. Like my family didn't use terms like colonization and, even though they know what racism is, like they don't necessarily use those terms. And so I think it's made me change how I talk about my research with my family, because you have to. If I want to have these conversations, I have to make it accessible, at least the language, because I feel like a lot of my family understands these experiences that we study and we talk about in class, but they don't have the same terminology. And so I think it's really pushed me to try to have these conversations not in the classroom. And that's a lot of trial and error on my part, because yeah, I'm like, okay, how do I say colonization without saying colonization, and so, yeah.
I think I had mentioned earlier that being able to take on many different perspectives or different lenses, I think has probably been the biggest change for me. Not only seeing it one way, but trying to understand and seeing it in many different ways. What I found really interesting too with this PhD program is the things that I've learned, I've actually kind of kept that in my own conversations with my children as we talk about, important issues in society. And then even having to have that discussion even with my partner. And for me, I just feel like it's really enlightening. And just having to have an open mind to maybe understand how others see the world. I think that has been the biggest thing for me, is just being open and trying to understand rather than being very judgmental.
I agree with Kehau and Latu. For sure. I think my mind has been expanded in the ways that like I thought I was critical, but I wasn't. Now I'm I feel like I have learned to like, oh, this is what critical is. It's a lot deeper than where it was. And definitely I think coming out of this Utah bubble and living in Los Angeles and learning from all these great professors out there at UCLA about CRT and all these things have really taught me to look deeper and an understanding of like, and asking more questions, I think, of why I do things and where did this come from and where are the beginnings and how can I apply it better? And like, where do I stand and where do I want to go with this information and this new knowledge that I'm learning? I think it's a constant thing that I'm being critical of myself and trying to think and expand deeper than the surface. And it's something that I'm still training in and trying to understand and practice. But I think what has changed outside of that, I am starting to bring things home. So there is more critical conversations that we would never have in my house, whether it be talking about religion or like the Tongan culture or colonization through religion, and specifically regarding Mormonism and all those things. I think it's like a new lens looking at these things of like, what I was missing, or what I was in a tunnel looking at things, and now I can expand and think a lot more for myself of how I want to apply things moving forward.
What a fun question. Thank you. Thinking of the ways that this work has changed me. I mean, probably a lot of ways, probably ways I don't know how to fully attend to. But the first thing that came to my mind was a quote from Cynthia Dillard. And I might butcher it a little bit, but it's certainly something that keeps working on me and that I'll hold with me. It's something along the lines of the work of an intellectual is the work of an artist, of changing the world through one's words, one's art, one's life. And as a visual artist, and as well as somebody who's struggling through this intellectual academic process, that idea works on me a lot to think about what I create in my life and in my world through my academic work. It's changed a lot about how I interact with myself, with my surroundings, with other people I don't know, people who I think don't deserve my respect. Like I've had to rethink all of those things in trying to answer that question of like kind of what kind of world am I creating with my art, with my work. So
Thank you. I think the final question will just take is less of a heavy one, but what is the first thing you all are planning to do once this PhD process is over? I think that's a good one because yeah.
Sleep. I'll go real quick. I think it's always constantly changing, but I think where it's at right now is like I went into my program wanting to be in administrative, but I think through the experiences that I've had over the years and in actually teaching courses that I realized that I love that part. And so I do want to go and start with the professorship route first, and then see where things go from there. I think I do eventually want to end up in admin somewhere. But I do want to focus on Pacific Islander communities and work. And so I want to be in areas where the population holds Pacific Islanders and communities where I can better support and help with my work and other things.
Well, first of all, I'm gonna find a cruise that's about a month just on the ocean, so that I never come back for the whole month and just relax. That would definitely be a goal of mine. And just like Lavi, I meant professorship was something that I didn't really think about until one of my mentors had mentioned it to me. And I thought, oh, I didn't know that would be something that I'd be interested in doing. And so that is definitely an area that I'd like to pursue. Currently in administration and enjoying working directly with students. But I know that professorship allows you to do that too. And so that's really exciting. And so those are probably what I am thinking about. And you know, as we're having this whole dialogue and discussion, I keep reflecting on a question about, you know, kuleana, or just responsibility, and just asking, you know, the question for me has always been like, what is my responsibility as a women Indigenous researcher in higher education? And for me, what I've discovered in the courses that I've taken is that relationship is key, but also reciprocation. And so I'm always thinking constantly about what are some ways that I can give back to my community, but particularly with the Tongan community.
Yeah, I agree with Latu. I think I'm spending a lot of time with work and school, but after I'm done, you know, hopefully not spending so much time with work and school. That's I'm gonna be happy when this is over. I'll just say that.
Tanji, you're the closest. You're closest to the line.
Well, you know, when I graduated from my undergrad, the first thing I did is went back to gardening for 4 years. So I don't know what that means after this. Sometimes, I mean, I read it, Inoke's question is more of a like right afterwards versus, you know, professionally. And so I'm going to roll with that and avoid the professional question and just stick with, I'll probably garden. I might cry for a week. I might dance to disco music, you know, maybe all of the above. And I guess I won't fully avoid the professional question, mostly because the idea about responsibility is very much present with me as well. I do hope that in the community work that I'm doing, I can find my way through to continuing the kind of work that I'm doing in my research, but beyond. So, and I do see that as a way of giving back. So, yeah.
Well, thank you all. I think that if you all could just drop your information, like your email or something. If there's a few more questions that we weren't able to touch upon that could be asked before I ask the very, very last question, which would be if you just drop it there. And then Kalei will be sending out our social media. And if any of you are okay with folks contacting you who are interested in PhD programs, or like some of the students that I interact with, I know you all have expressed too, you're fine with folks reaching out to you. But we'll share with on our social media ways to contact you. But the final word from all of you is quickly, in like a sentence or less, what would be your advice for prospective PhDs who identify as Pasifika or Tongan? We'll start with mood. Kehau, can you think of something?
Yeah, I dropped my email, so feel free to contact me. But I think my advice would be find your people. I think I'm still learning if I can work with someone or if I have to navigate someone. And that was advice given to me. You know, if you could work with them, great. And if you have to navigate them, then okay. Like we come from a long line of navigators and we can do it. But right when you do find those people, I think, yeah, they sustain you throughout this journey. And so I'm really blessed to have the people around me. But yeah.
Definitely. Although there have been hardships, like my network and friendships and groups of support have expanded to people I would have never met if I didn't take this jump or risk or just doing something that I normally wouldn't have done. And I think those people will be my friends forever, and they have definitely made my life better. And I think so that's important, is just to surround yourself with good people who support you and love you. I think that's important. I think another thing that has, so expand your networks. And also, I think something that is important to think about if you're applying for school or grad school or whatever is to find something that fits you, not you fit them, and to really be passionate about the research that you do, and where eventually what you eventually want to end up doing, is because when you do have those hard times and you want to give up, because there's been plenty throughout this journey for myself, but those are things that you're going to grab onto. It's like, this is why I'm here, this is why I'm doing this, and this is why I need to finish and keep moving forward, because you're going to need that. And I wholeheartedly believe that the research that we're all doing is so important and is going to help be the grounded work that is necessary for all of us to support and help our communities wherever we may be. And so I'm excited to read everyone's work, and thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of this with you guys. And I'm glad that this is another group of support we have here. So definitely, if anyone in the audience has any questions or comments or concerns or anything, you can reach out to me. I left my email down there as well.
Just to add, my probably big advice is find a mentor, find someone who can be, behind you all the way, that can help you with the process, and do the PhD program for the right reasons. So if you really love to do research work, if you want to teach, then this is really a good route to go into. And so I think that's key.
Yeah, thank you, Latu. I was going to say that the mentor thing, I think for me was one of the biggest things. Finding not just support. Support is totally great. I have a lot of support, but they can't tell me how to navigate this difficult process. So mentors who know how to tell me the things I don't even know how to ask for has been really helpful for me. And then I'll just add, since it came up, self-care. I'm with Audre Lorde. I think that taking care of ourselves is a form of radical activism. And I think that with all the joys, as we've covered, this work can be very difficult on so many levels. And taking care of ourselves through that, keeping ourselves strong, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, is probably one of the most powerful things we can do. So whatever it is for you, self-care all the way.
Thank you all. Thank you to our panelists for, I think that all four of you are inspirational, and like I talked about before, forging these paths for the rest of us that we're able to. And not to make you feel old or like an ancestor or something, but I think we'll look back on the work that you all are doing and really are going to be like, what were the foundational works that Tongans were doing? And so you haven't, I think like you all are in it, but for someone who is also a prospective PhD student, seeing all the various and varying degrees of the type of work that you're doing for community, it will be foundational. So I hope that you also, part of your self-care and self-talk is saying like, oh, my work is going to be the foundation for a lot of this, the work that's going to be done for Tongans. So thank you all. I thank you all for saying yes and for participating in this panel. I know you all are busy and have a lot of writing to do. So I appreciate you. Thank you all. Thanks for everyone for joining us, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Thank you.
Malo, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Malau Apito to all our contributors, specifically our Bridge team, School of Transport, Education, Culture, and Society, and again, Dr. Kehau Folau. Remember to join us every other Friday evening as we Talanoa with Pasifika scholars, staff, and community leaders. Make sure to like, subscribe, and follow us at U of U Pasifika Scholars and the Pasifika Archive. Till next time, tu'a fatu.